There's something inside you that you pretend not to feel, but you do. You pretend you've moved on, but you repeat it. You pretend to be strong, but deep down, you're begging for comfort. There's a part of your soul that you've locked away so tightly. You've almost convinced yourself it never existed, but it does, and it's tired of waiting for you to stop running. The kind of spirituality you were taught told you to seek the light, but it never taught you how to embrace your shadow. It never told you that healing hurts, that self-love tears you open, and that becoming whole demands betraying everything you were taught to be. Carl Jung didn't speak of evolution. He spoke of crossing, and only those who dare cross their own darkness find a peace that no one can take away. So now, no masks, no excuses, no sugar-coated spirituality. You're going to face the part you've avoided the most, because it's right there that your soul is waiting for you. You might smile, work, post photos, and say everything's fine. But deep down, you know something's broken. It's not visible to the eye, but you feel it. Sometimes when you wake up, sometimes in the silence before sleep. It's a kind of pain without an obvious cause, but it follows you like a quiet shadow. Carl Jung would call this an internal fracture, not in your body, but in your soul. And the cruelest part? It began forming while you were still learning to speak. It wasn't a choice. It was a survival instinct, because being whole in that environment wasn't safe. So you split yourself, and you've stayed split, living half a life, pretending it's enough. But there's a weariness you can't explain, and it betrays the lie of living like this. This fracture doesn't come from a single trauma. It comes from a pattern, years of adjusting your tone, shrinking your laughter, softening your desires. You learned to survive without bothering anyone, without asking too much, without feeling too deeply. You became what others could love, even if it cost you your truth. And now you're here, trying to understand why you have everything and still feel empty. True spirituality doesn't come to distract you from this. It comes to meet you exactly where it hurts. It's not about transcendence, it's about reintegration. The pain you feel today isn't a mistake, it's a calling. And the calling always comes before the change. It hurts because it breaks you open. It hurts because it reveals you. Want a clear example of this fracture? It's when someone tries to love you and you push them away. When you receive affection and feel guilty. When something good happens and you expect it to fall apart. That's not bad luck. That's your soul saying, there's still a part of me that doesn't believe I'm worthy. And that part won't go away with positive affirmations, or with productivity or distractions. It fades when you finally face what you've been avoiding, when you stop performing and start feeling. Carl Jung said that what is not brought to consciousness becomes fate. This silent fracture is shaping your fate until you decide to truly face it. But facing it isn't easy, because the pain you carry has no name, but it has roots. And the roots are in your story. In that part of your childhood you normalized, but never integrated. In the kind of love you were taught to accept, even when it hurt. This pain was passed down invisibly, but it operated like a law, like you signed without knowing, a contract of emotional scarcity. And today, without realizing, you still obey it. The ego tries to protect, the persona tries to hide, but the inner mother stays silent. And maybe it's time to listen. Because it's in that silence that the most powerful figure of the psyche begins to emerge, the one who formed you, but also hurt you. Before any words were spoken, there was a look, and that look shaped you. You might not remember it consciously, but your soul remembers every detail, the silence, the absence, the coldness, the invisible weight in the air when all you needed was to be held. The inner mother isn't just a memory. She's a living image that still influences every relationship, every boundary, every time you say, "I'm fine," when you're clearly not. Carl Jung called this an archetype, a symbolic force shaped by your earliest emotional experiences that continues to act, even decades later, as a distorted mirror of what you believe love, care, and belonging to be. And if that mirror cracked, your identity did too. This isn't about blaming the woman who gave you life. It's about recognizing the mother you built inside, even if unconsciously. Because when maternal presence is inconsistent, critical, or emotionally distant, the ego creates strategies. It builds personas that please, that read the room, that adapt, so as not to lose the little affection that's left. And the inner mother, this symbolic figure, becomes an internal filter. She's the one who whispers, without your noticing, "You're too much. You need to calm down. No one will love you like that." That voice isn't external anymore. It clings to you like a second skin, and worse, you believe it. The effect is devastating, because without realizing it, you become your own mother, but one who repeats the same old patterns. You reject your own pain, ignore your own limits, demand more from yourself than you would from anyone else. You live in an internal relationship based on performance, where even your sadness has to be justified. And the cruelest part, you think that's maturity. You think this hardening is spiritual growth, but it's not. It's survival. It's the wounded child forced to grow up too soon. It's the absence of nurturing turning into constant self-pressure. And true spirituality begins the moment you dare to look at that part and say, "I see you, and I won't do to you what was done before." But recognizing this takes courage, because sometimes the first mirror that shaped us was rejection. And those who learn to see themselves through rejection start seeing the whole world as a threat. You don't trust, you don't open up, you don't relax. And even when someone offers real love, you pull away. Not out of malice, but out of unconscious loyalty to pain. The ego puts up defenses, the persona smiles, but deep down, the child just wanted to be accepted as she was. And maybe now is the time to ask, does the inner mother who still walks with you still repeat that old coldness? Or has she started to unlearn? Because if we don't rewrite this symbolic image, we stay trapped in a script we didn't write. And that script, invisible but relentless, shapes how you experience love. You learned early on that love wasn't given. It had to be earned. And earning it took effort, good behavior, adapting, staying quiet. Affection came with invisible clauses. If you're a good girl, I'll see you. If you don't cry, I'll come closer. And that's how your first emotional law was born. The belief that you have to deserve love. Not simply be, but deserve. Carl Jung knew the deepest wound isn't outright rejection, but conditional affection, because it confuses you. It doesn't destroy you outright. It molds you. It creates an ego that lives to meet other people's expectations, that's afraid to make mistakes, that feels guilty just for existing too much. And this ego, which was born to protect you, now keeps you trapped inside a role. This law isn't written down anywhere, but it governs your life with chilling precision. It dictates who you love, how much you give, how much you tolerate, how much you sabotage yourself. It's like there's an unspoken code saying, be useful, be quiet, be enough. And if you dare to break that internal rule, the punishment is quick: guilt, fear of abandonment, self-sabotage. You find yourself going back to painful situations, not because they're good, but because they're familiar, because conditional love is addictive. It's unpredictable, but it's known. It hurts, but it's predictable. And that's why it's hard to leave. At least the pain has a script, and when love shows up without conditions, it feels strange. You don't trust it. You see it in the little things, like when you can't accept a compliment without downplaying it, or when you feel you have to do something to earn the affection you received, as if simply existing is a debt. That's not shyness, that's conditioning, an emotional framework built long ago. Deep spirituality doesn't ignore this. It exposes it. It reveals that behind the fear of opening up lies an old loyalty to pain, an unconscious pact with a law that's long expired, but the ego insists on obeying. And no matter how many books you read, how many mantras you chant, or how much you meditate, that law will keep running the show as long as your wounded child still believes she has to obey in order not to be left behind. And this is the turning point, because eventually true love shows up, not from someone else, but from you to you. And that's when the conflict begins. Because the old law will try to drag you back. It'll say you're being selfish, that you're going too far, that you're changing too much. But it's not selfishness, it's embodied spirituality. It's Carl Jung whispering from the collective unconscious. You weren't born to live under laws someone else wrote. And when that realization hits, everything starts to change, because you begin to question what once felt certain. And maybe you'll see that the emptiness haunting you has more to do with a lack of authenticity than a lack of love. And in that emptiness, the next step starts to take shape. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't scream, but slowly eats you up in silence. It shows up even when you're surrounded, even when you love, even when you're loved. An emptiness that has no name but lives inside. And so you run, you chase, you cling, you give yourself away too quickly. You believe that if that person stays, the hole will disappear, that if someone sees your depth, the pain will vanish. But what you call love is sometimes just a hiding place, a polished disguise for an ancient desperation. Carl Jung would say you're projecting, trying to find outside what you never received inside, and that's not romance. It's emotional survival. It's your soul trying to patch up with affection what childhood shattered with absence. You think you need someone to be whole, but don't realize that this person is already walking in with an impossible mission, to heal something even you haven't fully understood. And when they can't do it, you blame them, or you blame yourself. And the cycle begins again. That's how addictive relationships are born, where one gives what they don't have and the other expects what they never received. Emptiness, when ignored, turns into emotional hunger, and that hunger dresses up as love. But it's not love, it's fear. Fear of looking inward and finding only silence, only echoes, only the mute cry of a child still waiting to be held. So you distract yourself with conversations, with promises, with presence, but no outside presence can fill the internal absence of you for yourself. Look honestly. How many times have you fallen for someone who had nothing in common with your soul, but seemed capable of saving you? How many times did you stay in stories that had already ended, just to avoid tasting abandonment? How many times did you give and give until you lost yourself, thinking that was love? Spirituality that doesn't touch this pain is just performance. But real spirituality empties you before it fills you, breaks you before it aligns you, shows you that no one else is responsible for healing the wound only you can close. Carl Jung wasn't talking about romantic love. He was talking about reconnecting with the self. And as long as you're chasing soulmates to avoid facing the mirror, you'll keep repeating the same cycle, just with different names. Because in the end, the other is just a reflection, a mirror of the parts you haven't integrated. When someone ignores you, it touches your wound of invisibility. When someone leaves, it activates the old fear of being abandoned. When someone loves you, you doubt it, because your nervous system doesn't recognize love without pain, so you sabotage it, push it away, beg for it, and repel it at the same time. That's the paradox of emotional hunger, wanting something so badly that when it finally comes, it scares you, because it demands the death of the wounded persona and the birth of the inner mother, the one who can love without losing herself. But to birth this new version, you'll have to silence the world and hear an old voice, faint but still alive, your own. There's a voice living inside you, but it's not yours. It was planted there, with smiles that demanded too much, with scoldings that taught you to doubt yourself, with absences that created ghosts, and with presences that smothered your essence. This voice learned to correct you before anyone could reject you, to silence you before your truth made others uncomfortable, to shrink you so that someone else's love wouldn't walk away. And now, every time you try to grow, it shows up, disguised as conscience, as caution, as maturity. But deep down, it's just fear dressed as common sense. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to survive in a world that didn't validate who we truly were. But there comes a point when the mask begins to suffocate you. This voice doesn't shout, it whispers. It holds you back the exact moment you dare to be. The second you look in the mirror and think about changing, the instant you almost believe you deserve more. It's like one part of you is always ready to sabotage the blossoming of another. And the cruelest part, that sabotage sounds just like you. The same tone, the same rhythm. But it's not really you. It's your wounded inner mother echoing the things she once heard. It's the psychic residue of a childhood where love was a reward for being good, where affection came with conditions. And now, even as an adult, you still wait for permission to fully exist, and you might not even realize you're waiting for it from someone who never received it either. And so, they repeat. Without knowing, they repeat. That voice learned that living means obeying, that being loved means being agreeable, that growing hurts, so better not even try. And you keep repeating the script, even while saying you want to change. Because real change requires confrontation, and confronting that voice feels like betraying the one who raised you. That's where the pain lives, in the fear of breaking from the emotional program of your childhood, in the terror of disobeying the mother figure you internalized. But there is a turning point when you hear that voice and choose not to follow it. When it says you can't, and you answer, I'm doing it anyway. That inner rebellion is spirituality in action. It's shadow work in motion. It's the moment when the ego begins to step aside for the self, and the self doesn't bow to old commands. It observes, embraces, and rebuilds. But rebuilding hurts, because the silence that voice used to fill is terrifying when empty, and the emptiness it hid is your truth. It's what's left of you before the adaptations, before the roles, before the emotional performance. Carl Jung said the unconscious runs our lives until it becomes conscious. And becoming conscious means looking that voice in the eye and saying, I hear you, but I won't follow you. It's mothering yourself, caring for your psyche the way you'd care for a wounded child, changing the tone, embracing without demanding, protecting without smothering, because as long as that voice is louder than your instincts, you'll keep living on autopilot, guided by someone else's pain. And only when you dare to silence it, not with violence, but with awareness, will you finally hear your own voice. The one that's always been there, just waiting for space to be born. Sometimes you think you're making decisions, that you chose that relationship, that you wanted that job, that you decided to back off, to give in, to please. But if you look closely, you'll see it wasn't really a choice. It was a reflex, an echo, an automatic pattern born from pain. Like your past pressed the button before you even had time to think. Carl Jung said that what's not brought to consciousness governs your life, and you call it fate. That's exactly it. Unhealed pasts disguise themselves as instinct, as intuition, as rationality. But it's just fear, dressed up as protection. And without noticing, you keep feeding the same story, with new names, different places, updated excuses, but the same wound, still bleeding beneath the illusion of control. Childhood left invisible codes etched into you, Rules you never agreed to, but follow religiously, like don't be a burden, don't cry, don't expect too much, don't be too much. And then you grow up. And every time someone or something touches those old spots, your reaction feels out of proportion. But it's not because you're weak, it's because that pain was never seen. And what isn't seen gets repeated. The inner mother tries to protect, but without awareness, she only knows how to repeat what she learned. And the past, like a needy ghost, keeps pulling you into similar stories, familiar emotions, old wounds. Because the ego prefers a predictable hell over uncertain freedom. The persona clings to the pain it understands, and spirituality turns into an escape when you try to transcend your pain without integrating it first. Trauma has memory, and emotional memory disguises itself as intuition. You think you're feeling something's off, but really, you're just reliving an old emotional script. That's why some triggers hit you like emotional bombs, because they're not about now, they're about before. They're echoes, unresolved scenes that get activated when someone uses your mum's tone, when someone disappears like your dad used to, when someone dismisses your feelings the way they did when you were little, and suddenly you're back in that psychic space, that dark room, that frozen state, that emptiness, and the decision you thought you made was just an emotional reaction wearing the mask of a rational choice. But what if you started noticing, creating a pause between the trigger and your response? What if every time you felt a strong emotion, you asked, is this really mine, or is it from my past? That's what real spirituality looks like in practice. It's not about lighting incense and repeating affirmations. It's about confronting the places in your psyche that still run on trauma autopilot. Carl Jung would say, true freedom begins when you choose with awareness, not with pain. When your soul is present in your decisions, not chained to echoes of a time that's already passed, because the past doesn't have to decide for you anymore. But for that to happen, you have to learn how to listen to it and not obey it. Only then can the next step come from a new place, a place that's yours, alive, unconditioned. There's a quiet kind of waiting that lives in many people, a waiting for the mother who never came whole, for the version of her who would love without hurting, who would truly see you without projecting, who would hold you without conditions. And you grow up, but you still wait. You wait in every relationship, you wait in every boss, you wait in every friend. You wait in every female figure of authority who shows you even the slightest approval, because deep down, part of your soul believes that if you're good enough, maybe she'll come back, maybe she'll apologize, maybe she'll finally see you, maybe she'll understand how much it hurt. But the most brutal and most liberating spiritual truth is that maybe she never will. Carl Jung said individuation begins the moment we stop projecting. And there's no projection more unconscious than expecting the mother we missed in the women we meet now. This waiting keeps you stuck, like a soul orbiting the same scene, replaying the moment when everything began to break. You could have an amazing job, a healthy relationship, be surrounded by love, and still feel a void, a longing, a whisper. But what if she saw me? And that secret pain seeps into everything. Because as long as you wait for her, you delay yourself. As long as you wish she would change, you don't. As long as you need her to say, I love you just the way you are, you can't love yourself that way. And this prison is disguised as loyalty, as if letting go of that hope would be abandoning her. But it's not. It's a sacred kind of disobedience. An emotional rebellion that marks the beginning of a new psychic era. The era where you stop asking for permission to exist. Stopping the wait isn't rejection, it's emotional maturity. It's recognizing that the inner mother living in you needs to be rescued from the past. That you're no longer the dependent child, you're the adult who chooses, who nurtures, who lovingly confronts, who looks back and instead of begging for comfort, builds a home inside. Carl Jung would tell us this is the path to real healing, stepping out of someone else's orbit to enter your own soul's. Sacred disobedience is the act of not repeating, of no longer shaping yourself to please, of no longer going quiet to avoid conflict, of not turning back just because her absence still aches. It's stopping the delay of your own expansion, waiting for a permission that's already yours. And most of the time, you only discover that when you're tired of waiting. But that tiredness isn't weakness, it's transition. It's the moment where pain starts turning into choice. And when you choose to stop waiting, something in you rebels. The old persona throws a tantrum. The conditioned voice accuses, the wound screams, because letting go of the dream of being rescued feels like dying to the old script, like killing the myth of maternal redemption. And that's scary, but also freeing, because in place of that old waiting, space is made for the birth of your true inner mother, the one you never had, but can become. The one who doesn't demand perfection, who doesn't disappear, who doesn't abandon you when you mess up. But she can only be born when you break the psychic loyalty to the pain that formed you. And that's when the fury starts to rise, not as anger at her, but as a life force finally rising for you. There's a kind of fury that isn't destruction, it's birth. A fury that doesn't explode out of hatred, but because holding it in any longer would mean continuing to die in silence. It's the scream you swallowed at 7 years old when they told you you were being too much. It's the anger you suppressed when your pain was dismissed. It's the outrage you silenced when they said it's all in your head. And you learned that feeling was dangerous, that expressing discomfort was wrong, that slamming doors was disrespectful, that standing your ground was selfish, and passivity became your disguise for maturity. Spirituality was used as a mask for acceptance. But Carl Jung warned us, what we repress intensely returns with symbolic violence. And there comes a point when your body can't fake it anymore. It trembles, your throat tightens, your chest aches, your soul screams. And the fury comes, not to destroy the world, but to rebuild you. This sacred rage is the opposite of vengeance. It doesn't want to hurt anyone, it just wants to set you free. Free from the good girl who never complained, from the grown woman who still thinks she has to earn love, from the inner mother who learned to punish before she could nurture. It's an energy that rises up your spine when you realize you've spent your whole life apologizing for existing. And it doesn't arrive with logic, it arrives with truth, with a surge of life, with internal rupture. It's when you finally see you can't keep trying to fit into a mold that suffocates your essence. You can't keep smiling when something violates you. You can't keep calling numbness peace. Sacred rage is the spark that tears through the persona and reveals the soul, raw, alive, untamed, the one you've always hidden just to be accepted. But listen, this rage isn't a green light to unleash on others. It's an invitation to take your place, to set boundaries where there was once submission, to say no without guilt, to say enough without apologizing. It's the fire that burns the silent contract with pain. Carl Jung would say it's the archetypal force that breaks your pact with the unconscious shadow, the one that kept you small in the name of some false harmony. Sacred rage restores your wholeness. And that's why so many people fear this power, because it exposes the emotional lies you use to maintain relationships. It reveals what was fake, and it demands courage. Courage to change direction, to let go of the perfect image, to lose those who only stayed because you stayed quiet. This rage scares you because it shows just how long you've been absent from yourself. But in that shock comes awakening. Because behind the fury, there is love. Self-love in its rawest form. Love that refuses to stay buried. Love that pulses in your chest like a soul-wide demand. No more surviving. And when that force settles in, something inside you rises. It's no longer the little girl, it's the woman. No longer the daughter begging for comfort, it's the mother rising from within. This fury pulls you out of passivity because deep down, it's life itself calling you to be born again. And those who hear that call know there's no turning back. The path now is reconstruction. And rebuilding requires rewriting. Rewriting the script of your own story, not as someone waiting for permission, but as someone finally stepping into her power. Every story poorly told becomes an illness for the one who carries it. And your story, the one you lived in silence, shaped to fit, submissive to conditional affection, needs to be rewritten, but not with pretty words, with actions that break the old script. Becoming the mother you needed isn't about being perfect. It's about finally showing up for yourself. It's having the courage not to repeat, to stand up when your mind tries to squeeze you into spaces where your soul can no longer breathe. Carl Jung said that individuation requires crossing through your own shadow, and that shadow often disguises itself as inherited behavior, as just my way, as that's how it's always been. But it wasn't. It was built, and anything that's been built can be dismantled. Rewriting begins the moment you realize you no longer have to follow the emotional script that once hurt you. Being the mother you needed means embracing your inner child when she cries for no apparent reason. It means not abandoning yourself when life feels too big. It means being able to tell yourself, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Sounds simple, but it's revolutionary because it requires breaking silent pacts with voices still living inside you. The one that demands performance, the one that says you must earn rest, the one that ties your worth to your usefulness. None of these voices are you. They are emotional ghosts you inherited, memories that keep dictating how you treat yourself. That's why rewriting isn't about forgetting the past. It's about no longer letting it write for you. When you take the pen of your own story, something starts to shift in your body, in your daily life, in your relationships. And that change doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. A practical example: start validating your emotions without needing a logical reason. If you're tired, rest. If you're sad, feel it. No need to explain. No need to rationalize. Create rituals of emotional care. It might be writing letters to yourself, meditating with affirmations like, I am safe within me, or even speaking to your reflection in the mirror, saying everything you needed to hear from your mother but never did. Yes, it might feel strange, but it's deeply transformative. Carl Jung believed every symbolic act holds the power to heal. And healing isn't about erasing pain, it's about integration. It's looking at everything you felt and saying, this shaped me, but it doesn't define me. Rewriting begins when you stop reacting like a wounded daughter and start acting like the whole woman who chooses. And the most beautiful part, when you become that mother to yourself, your very presence begins to heal generations. What once was repetition becomes restoration. What was shadow becomes conscious light. And without even trying, you become for others what no one was for you. Not out of obligation, but from overflow, because those who care for themselves care without depletion. Those who embrace themselves embrace others without self-abandonment. Those who love themselves love without losing who they are. And that's the moment the wound becomes a portal. The pain becomes purpose. The inner chaos starts to reorganize, because finally you understand. You weren't born to continue a script of pain. You were born to rewrite it with the ink of your own soul. Healing isn't something you understand, it's something you embody. You can spend years reading about spirituality, about the ego, about the inner mother, and still react like that wounded child every time silence settles in. Because understanding isn't the same as transforming. There comes a point on the journey where theory no longer saves you. It traps you. It makes you believe that thinking about pain is the same as healing pain. But it's not. The true edge of freedom appears when you realize you already know everything you needed to know, but you still don't live it. You still don't stand up for yourself when it matters. You still don't say no without guilt. You still don't allow yourself to be fully seen. Real freedom isn't a beautiful concept. It's the moment you cross the threshold, even while trembling, even while crying, even without any guarantee of love on the other side. And that's what scares you. Because to cross that threshold, you'll have to let go of every version of yourself you built to be accepted. You'll have to disappoint the ones who shaped you. You'll have to say goodbye to the narrative of the understood victim. You'll have to die to many little identities: the perfect daughter, the accommodating partner, the spiritual one who never gets angry. All of that collapses when your soul decides to live for real. Carl Jung said that to individuate is to become who you are, despite the pressures of the collective unconscious. It's breaking free from the persona that tamed your soul. And that break isn't mental, it's visceral. It happens when you stop asking why and start acting despite the pain, despite the doubt, despite the past, because now it's your soul in charge, not your trauma. Maybe the first practical step is just that. Stop looking for another answer and start building a new gesture. If you feel stuck, take one step outside the cell. A symbolic act is enough. A sentence you've always avoided. A silence you've always feared. A boundary you never dared to set. Healing isn't comfort, it's rupture, but it's in that rupture that freedom starts to breathe. And don't expect the world to applaud you, because freedom threatens those who are still trapped. There will be judgment, rejection, loss, but there will also be birth. A new way of being in the world is born. A presence that no longer needs to perform, that no longer needs to prove anything, that no longer needs to beg for love, because it is. It knows itself, it stands tall, and the truth is, deep down, you always knew this moment would come. The moment when nothing external would be enough. The moment when the calling no longer comes from pain, but from your very soul. The moment you stop seeking salvation in someone else and start reconnecting with the silent center that has always guided you. That's real freedom. Not the one that shouts independence, but the one that whispers wholeness. The freedom to feel without fear, to be without pretending, to love without betraying yourself, to live without splitting apart. And once you taste that kind of wholeness, there's no going back. A soul that has touched its fullness will never settle for fragments again. Now tell me, how many times have you looked in the mirror and still didn't see yourself? How many times have you called yourself strong while bleeding inside and smiling on the outside? How many times have you tried to heal without touching the pain that actually shaped you? You don't need more books. You don't need more theories. You need courage to disobey, to stop waiting for the mother who won't come, to stop repeating the script of the wound, and to start writing the script of the soul. The question now isn't what hurt you, it's what you're going to do with all of it. Will you keep living as a fragment, or will you start becoming whole? If something tore open inside you, write. Sometimes a comment is just the first cut back to your soul. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Because here, pain is also a portal.